Wagwan, everybody. Welcome to the Diaspora History Podcast, where we'll be speaking about history and as well family history and how history relates in terms of Caribbean people for the present as well as in the past, and how in the past, what that does and brings forth for what we are going through at present and what we can learn from our history, from our family, and take that moving forward. So I do hope you enjoy the podcast. And if you like it, please ensure to subscribe, like, and review. Thank you. Thank you, Darren Shillingford, for coming on to the podcast, Diaspora History, and to speak about music history, so to speak, but to look at it in the frame of the fact that music is kind of like an archive. We're tapping into the memory bank, and that's what I saw on your feed, on Instagram. And I really, I'm glad that I reached out to you to have this conversation, because I think it's important enough that we need to be able to speak to that and recognize that this is a type of a memory bank or an archive that we're peeling back and accessing. So, but before we start this discussion, I would just like to have you just do a brief introduction of yourself.
Sure. Okay. So again, my name is Darren Shillingford. I am originally from Dominica, a small island in the Caribbean. Not the Dominican Republic. I don't, most people get that mixed up here. Dad is from Dominica, mom is from Trinidad. I've lived in both, also Grenada, and so I have a little bit of knowing of some of the islands in the Caribbean. Professionally, I am a music educator and pianist. And so what I've been working on recently was a PhD in music education. So I have actually all my other degrees are all in music education. And so then coming into the music education space to try and do that has brought me to a lot of this work that I continue to do here. So it's a bit of my background. Music teacher, piano is my main instrument. I love teaching Steelpan as well. Taught that in Trinidad, and also trying to make something happen here in the DC, Maryland area.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, because we're going to start on your love for music education, as of course you've indicated as your primary expertise, but you've also explored the wider landscape of Caribbean music. Would you be able to tell us how your journey as an educator led you into the deeper engagement with Caribbean musical traditions?
So, as a music educator, the type of person I am, and with the knowledge I have with research and these things, I believe in teaching music with its context, right? It has to be taught with that context. So then I have to become someone who knows about this piece, where it's from, the people. I like digging into that. It tells more of the story. So mostly as a general music teacher in classes and choral, teaching that background. There's the person who wrote it, the lyrics, its meaning, whether implied or suggested, and its relevance to us now. So again, in music education, and sort of my role has been, then it goes along the lines of music appreciation, music history, music and culture. And so whilst I've taught mainly up here, it's K through 8, that's elementary, middle school, primary school for us. I have to teach these things over and over again. So, right, getting the youth to understand this, getting it down to a level that we understand the basics and things like that. Swing now to the PhD, where there are so few people, right, in music education doing any sort of research. So we have a lot of, performers who would have done education and probably put some music into it, ethnomusicologists, historians to an extent, and so yes, so then music education, there's very few of us, and still in the field, still all of us have to probably come to a US or some sort of foreign university to get at least a PhD in that. So that background in learning that, doing all these things, when I had to sort of do research and go into that, I couldn't find anything on music education specific research. So I had to look at the tangential things. So history, education journals, general, um, ethnomusicology, as I said, and a lot of dead ends to find anything of any sort of music education person. Again, very few, and if they exist, they might have like a different title, or it's other mainland countries. Some of the Hispanic countries, or like Cuba, or I'm forgetting which one, have some people who have done some just preliminary overviews, right? Because then it becomes, what is Caribbean? Where do I put the boundaries of what is Caribbean? And so I came up with that identity of, are we speaking of the English speaking Caribbean? Are we speaking of Latin American and the Caribbean? And I think that started to be the research process always makes you go down these rabbit holes, and I went. So all these were questions I was trying to think, how do I define it? In trying to write a paper, how am I defining it? And then what am I limiting myself? And I did a horrible job at limiting myself to that, right? Because do I call it Dominica? Just there, I'm the only one. Do I call it Trinidad or Jamaica, the islands that seem to have a little more resources and they have universities there? What about the others, right? My small island is sort of shone through. Let me look at St. Lucia. Do we have somebody there, right? And then crossing the barrier over to the other languages, right? Dominica also has influence of the French, so then I was also so to everything that a PhD is in trying to make you narrow your scope. I did the opposite and just went all into anything I could find that I categorize as Caribbean. And so, right, with that knowledge of digging in, trying to find who are the people, who is making the music, why are they making this music, what does it mean to them, and all that on top with the sort of decolonial lens or things like that, just kept me expanding and going down this to really find out what is it we have here, how would I structure this. So for me in music ed, that pathway to becoming a music teacher is not very well defined. So but we have music and we have music teachers, so that in itself is a conundrum, but I don't have a path to it, but they exist. Again, still framing it on how I see it in the US system, and some others. So yeah, that's a bit of where I've gone with the music teaching and curriculums and how we expand that. It's not the same way, but it's there. And I can't, in trying to articulate how it's there and how I know across, why can I use a story from a St. Lucian thing and be like, actually, this also applies to Dominica, but I have to sort of prove that those two places are connected, or do I limit it? And these were the struggles I had with, professors and editors of my work, to be like, what, but this is a different place. This, how you have to try and make it clear and connected. And that's what I struggled to explain outside of people in the Caribbean who might just get it, but it also makes you wonder, how, why are we so connected even though we have this geographical distance? Um, right? It's behaving like a united Caribbean without being with board like geographical borders. So that's 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 where a lot of this came into, and I kept seeing these patterns and things, and I just been like, this is very much like this. How did this reach here? So
No, absolutely. And so would you say that Caribbean music functions as a form of a memory archive?
yes, whether we realize it or not, I think in some ways it's forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I put within music the three dimensions that I'm sort of thinking of it, right? There's the melody, that tune, there's the rhythm, the beats and the beats of that, and a melody can have a rhythm to it, and then the lyrics. So those three layers, we might think of just the lyrics, right? That's the written part, that's the sung part. We can just think about it as just, well, what are they talking about? And that's in some ways surface level.
Mm-hmm.
Melodies get a little more disguised because sometimes we use similar melodies, but you have to have somebody who has that ear to be like, oh, that's the same tune from, oh, they're using a piece of this. We see this more in pop songs when sometimes they put a little ode to something, and sometimes they do it with rhythm. That's what I see a lot of pop songs do, right? There's a ode to something in that rhythm. But yes, the rhythm being something that is less explored and understood. We're not in Western music, so being classically trained, watching melodies and analyzing
Mhm.
chords, no one is ever really looking at rhythm and the rhythmic structures. And I think that's where I started to realize that there's more to it. So the memory can be preserved on, I want to say, a multidimensional way if you have the tools to decode it. And that's where I think really good musicians know how to program each of these layers to sort of say that again, whether they realize it or not, because it's sonic. So if I've heard this, I'm going to incorporate it somewhere. That in itself is a memory. Where did you hear that? Why is it important for you to include it?
Mhm.
Right? So it's a tangential way that I'm now exploring, like, this melody, is it a copycat of this, or is it just happen to be? And there's too many times where artists do this. There is an overlap of something. They are paying tribute to that. So it is included intentionally. I think sometimes now we don't see that. It's there and it's just seen as a patch or something more with
Mhm.
electronic music that we just put in there. It's like, no, but it's come from somewhere. That's where this the history has to catch up to what's just there. Because in present moment, oh, it's just music and I do whatever with it, and there's a deeper layer.
Okay.
Um, so yes, there's many ways that that can be encoded within Caribbean music, many other musics, but again, what I'm focusing on is through the region how this similar things have happened.
So would you say as well that music is, often used as a form of resistance by Caribbean people, even if it's not always immediately recognized?
Yes, three things I sort of narrowed this down to. A form of resistance by educating. In a society where we couldn't, you weren't allowed to read, you weren't allowed to learn, um, right? That education was elevation, and if they knew how to read, if they knew how to do this stuff, that, that was frowned upon, right? We had to be kept oppressed. So education, the power of well-written music to organize and infiltrate minds in a way that you don't see coming, um, that in itself is a form of resistance, right? I'm going to let you know, I'm going to educate you in some way, whilst they're saying they do not want you educated. In the rhythms, the resistance for me goes hand in hand with dance.
Mhm.
I think sometimes my I'll leave that for a second. I'll come back to that. But rhythm and dance and movement, especially if you think of performances where there's a drummer and a dancer and they are leading off of each other, right? And so I think of one dance as, or let's call it resistance, actual resistance, actual like fighting, right? So I'll use Brazilian copiera, if I'm saying it correct. That's more global south, right? If we want to claim that as Caribbean, I'll call it as African tradition. But Jamaican stick fighting, canboulé, calenda, these stick fighting things where it's a martial art set to that music. And so the drum is an integral part, whether you're rehearsing these movements, these rhythms, that in itself is resistance, right? I have you there and just, oh, we're just playing drums. No, you are rehearsing your art of resistance, right? Fighting. Um, and then resistance through, I'll go off resistance through dance, right? And how much there is in dance to, right, express joy. There's so much now on movement and getting, I want to say, trauma and other things out of your body through movement and dance. And so where there is music, and again, understanding that music and dance being connected, it goes, yes, because you have to dance to it. And I'm telling you what to do with the drum, and certain patterns mean, okay, and now in your upper body, chest, these movements more flowing or lower to your legs, and whatever it means, all these layers are its form of resistance or educating and remembering how to keep yourself grounded,
Mhm.
um, and able to resist. Yeah, hopefully that.
No, absolutely.
Please feel free to tell me if something that doesn't make some sense. I sort of get caught up in these.
That's fine. No, that's fine. Don't worry about that. That's fine because the other thing, my other question is just on, of course, with Caribbean music. When you think about Caribbean music, classical composition is not always part of the mainstream conversation. What can you share about Caribbean classical composers?
So this is one, as a classically trained person, right? I've gone
Mhm.
to what I'm calling Western conservatories, right? They are conserving the European names, but there's a caveat to that because then when you think of classical music, sometimes we go to, again, Western European white people. And a part of one of the first rabbit holes I went down was then being like, oh, but wait, there are black classical composers, right? I mean, we exist, we're in these spaces, though
Mhm.
very new to them sometimes, or seemingly new in more of a presence. There are these one off people, and they happen to have, which I found great glee in, this Caribbean connection, if not for them
Mhm.
directly or someone in the periphery. I enjoyed going down these rabbit holes. Um, Classical music, so this is something I think we have to contend with. Because we are a mix of many cultures, right? So I'll
Mhm.
take even mine personally. My last name, Shillingford, it sounds very British, right? It sounds very something over there, right? There's a part of me that will contend with yes, and we have had traditions. There was that a time I think, you know, where the Caribbean celebrated being a commonwealth, right? We were happy to be part of that. We saw that identity before we started seeing what was really happening, or before people started being like, oh, too many of y'all are here. What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. Right? Windrush generation. But there was a part of us that celebrated that. But classical music in itself has a big tie to this elitist structure, right? And because classical music in Europe was not seen as thing of the people, it was for royalty, it was for church. Sort of broke that
Mhm.
barrier, and but church was a place for a select group of people who are united under this faith, and if everybody there is of that faith, it becomes a space,
Mhm.
right? But when you think of, I mean, Hallelujah Chorus and Handel, he was paid by royalty and commissioned to do these things. What did they make their money off of? I went in deep in and be like, oh, they actually paid him at one point with shares from the Royal African Company. What was that involved in? Human
Mhm.
trafficking.
Mhm.
That, I mean, he clocked it out. He deposited that check, or whatever it was.
Mhm.
So withdrawing that money. So fair enough. But it has this relation to elitism. So even as I name like Joseph Boulogne, Chevalier de Saint George, that is one of probably the more known black composers of that era who rubbed shoulders with Marie Antoinette, Mozart. He's up there in these elites, but he is not included in a lot of, at least in the US, a lot of literature. It's now happening. We are now starting to peel that back. We're now starting to include him in different things. Within the Caribbean, I think that's where it is, right? We are in our world and haven't, just lack of researchers to sort of say like, well, who are these people? Where are they from? What, like, I have that vested interest in going like, who are they? Where were they from? Oh wait, Chevalier de Saint George. That Joseph Boulogne can look white, but oh, this is a black or mixed person, right? He was. There's clearly documents that said he was um, mixed or mulatto, or so many
Mhm.
things with the French. Um, Right, and so do we identify with that as a European composer? I mean, he was, but he has origins there. I mean, I claim him, right? So
Mhm.
it becomes, we don't know. We sometimes don't think that there were people. So it's just, um, we don't make that association. And again, still how classical music is treated is like a space for some, right? It can still sometimes give that access of that it's not the music of the people. Ah, we need this music for more upscale events. That is a big one. And so it has its things, and we have sort of bridged that gap,
Mhm.
um, and made it more accessible, especially in Trinidad. I continue to commend how I've been in meetings with they're saying, but how do we make more people want to know about this and see themselves in that music?
Yeah.
Right? That's an important part. So when we're not seeing ourselves in that music, we go, that's
Mhm.
not for me. But when you hear of these musics that you're like, wait, there is classical composers of that era, speaking of it
Yeah.
as an era, who were prolific, who did stuff, who lived then. And again, I think their stories tell something about the narrative of like, ah, the black inferior and oh, these places are third world. No, they were able to learn and do these things and compose these scores, but they probably did not have as much access to preserve their works over time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's where some bias creeps in. But yes, we do have classical composers. It's just not as known.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, this is where our work starts to get that knowledge out there. We have to do that work because I'm seeing how, Europe is not invested in keeping those stories. They don't claim along those lines of difference, which is sometimes racial.
Yeah.
They are not as invested. So
Mm-hmm.
we in the Caribbean, when we see that, oh, that take on these works, put it into something, revive it, tell that story, right? It's the story of him existing in a space that didn't welcome him and so many others. Right? I'm talking about the black men. I have a list of probably a lot of black men. There's black women that we have no idea what they did. Even in his periphery, who was, there's a lot of women also lost and other people
Mm-hmm.
in this. Anyway, I again can go on very long, but yeah, classical music is something that we can explore. Um, it tells that story, and I think of music as telling that story. These people and their stories and what they went through and what they put down in music to express that, whether just their plain genius, their lyrics, what they spoke to, and then sometimes in their rhythms, what they heard and why they incorporated it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because that's needed to know. And I will, get the links from you and put that in the show notes as well. But now we're going to go back to rhythm and just to talk as to why it's so central to Caribbean music and why these rhythms are really powerful and how do they help us release or carry this archival memory.
So that's where I sort of go to. I have to tell this in a story like way, right? That's
Yes, that's fine.
um that archival memory. I want to put this in a way I think some people might relate to, and I'm going to go to food. So when you go to different islands or countries and you end up hearing something like, oh, fry bake, oh, Johnny cake, fry dumpling, festival, they are different. But sometimes in first instance we go, oh, this is like a bakes, but is made with, oh, this is like, and we recognize something or we relate to it in some way, right? Or sometimes it's that exact same thing. One is more like, we call it like meat pie or empanadas or pastel
Mm-hmm.
or patty or pie. Um, it's similar but different, but it's a dough with meat, right? When you break it down. So with rhythm, I think there is something there, and there is something there that I'm trying to get more people to understand and see and look into. I don't think there's a lot of research on this. It exists in places where I think when we hear something, the latest example I have is like listening to Bad Bunny for some people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sort of things. And I made a video on this going like, if you heard that music and it did something to you, as I now try to travel to other like Latin American countries, and you hear the music and just like, it there's something I just, or sometimes it happens when I hear a video, sometimes from Africa, and there was this thing where there's this young girl and she's singing, and there are other people singing, but there's something to the music, and you just go, ooh, that touched my soul. There's these intangible interaction when you hear it, you just go, and I think that happens with a lot of us with rhythm. At least when we hear that music, we don't realize we're responding to that rhythm. Um, that archival memory. So amongst all the other things, I think there's a way it plays out for us. The one thing I think most people can relate to in like soca music and more of our popular genres, if you really are with it and you've done it, is the chipping, the right, the just you get the beat immediately and it's in your body, right? And so it going direct to your body. There are some people who get it. There are some people who struggle with it. This is where it kind of goes along a racial line, but not
Yeah.
really, because culturally, again, Trinidad is so there. Everybody that looks like anybody in Trinidad and in Jamaica, in those multicultural places, they know how to do it. I think the rest of the world, when they're seeing a white boy winding up on a pole and be like, hey, that seems novel to some people, but that's a Trini, that's a Jamaican. They've grown up in this environment, so the rhythm. There's something we teach. This is where again I go. I don't know. I can't pin it down to one thing because not all schools have music teachers to teach you in this way. So it's something that exists in culture and community and our entertainment, and perhaps a small shop that you've grown up to playing the same music over and over. These are some of the things that I think teach us those, whether we realize it or not. But then we have spaces that emphasize this, right? So the parties that you go to, people's houses, parties, uh, that this is how people are dancing, this is how people are responding to it. And when you hear it in another context, you go, oh, that I know what to do here. Look, oh, and you will again see either movements and be like, oh, that's like this but different. So yeah, there's the rhythmic structure is there, but parceling it out and having an idea of what's going on is something I'm still working on,
Mm-hmm.
but it's there in these intangible ways.
Yes, yes,
Um,
definitely.
and that again, when you start extracting, if you are able to then name what that rhythm is and where it has gone and the permutations of it, you start realizing, oh, there were people here. So again, just with I'll put this uh,
Mm-hmm.
jerk
Yeah.
food, understanding that as indigenous food, and that has reached to different parts of the region, right? And so we have it now. It might have changed this thing, but the concept of it, jerk, is there. Um, and so it's surviving this way. Hold on, where's my tie to this was rhythmically. Not only I just lost the train of thought. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll come back to it later. But right now, we're just going to go back into Steelpan, as it's one
Sure.
of those, iconic Caribbean instruments. What makes steel band music so infectious and deeply connected to the people?
This is one, again, more research is needed. And I will say this, I haven't experienced Panorama as playing in it. I have seen it. I have sort of researched it from a distance. And
Mm-hmm.
again, from living in Trinidad, understand what it represents and still trying to figure that out. But understanding it as a rhythmic instrument, it's a percussion instrument, right? So, and again, we have to big it up for what it is. It is the newest, the only instrument invented in the 20th century, the only chromatic acoustic instrument invented in the 20th century. So, whilst there are others and some of them are digital and all these other things, this is a acoustic instrument, chromatic, and again, it still has a lot of work to do. That was invented in the 20th century. I think it is also, to give it even more props, to rephrase it, it is the newest instrument invented in the Western Hemisphere of the world, as far as I can tell, right? Um, it is born out of resistance to colonial rule. So understanding that they were banning rhythm, they were like,
Mm-hmm.
stop playing these drums. That is throughout the region. They kept, right, even through the Americas, they kept banning drums, and that's where I think that is the first click that I went. Why do they keep banning drums? What is it about these drums that threatened them, right? Threatened that power. And so again, these groups of young, it was amongst mostly young men, at least that's the story there, said, oh, you want to ban our drums? All right, cane, or they're going to take the cane or the tambu bamboo, and they're going to cut it at different lengths, and they're going to keep their rhythm going. No, we're not playing drums. This is not, you banned drums. We are playing this. And so again, they banned that. And so again, wanting to continue that, oh no, we're not playing drums. Look, we're just hitting on metal cans. We're hitting on
Mm-hmm.
dustpans and cricks tins and these things. And here comes the evolution of this thing where they're going, oh, this is making this sound, and we're realizing what it is. there's a lot more that I think is just understood by people, and we need to extract those stories and what it meant, right? And some of these people
Mm-hmm.
have passed on that's the thing that sort of dies. But it is rhythm, right? It is rhythm with melody. So and I want to say embodied more so. Whilst I can play a piano and my fingers are responsible for doing that, and that is rhythmic and and singing and all these other things, there is a level of rhythm, but this one is percussion. It's when you watch Panorama, you see a dance going on, and that's where I think that's connected. So we are connected to that because it's taking something at the very core, a philosophy of rhythm at its core. Yes, adding melody, and then this other thing that's happening, which is it's being banned, and we are being creatively resistant
Mm-hmm.
to this. And there's a lot more. I'm just going to briefly go through it of
Yeah.
just like community, right? It is communal. Steel pan culture is communal. It's with each other. Now, again, there's a lot of things thrown onto that. Again, of resistance. They label these people from the ghettos, uneducated, um, violent. Yes, there were, again, the products of oppressing our people and trying to destroy them and trying to remove all traces of their, I want to say, Africanness, really, all traces of their culture. This is where it is far more resistant, and sometimes I mourn for our African American counterparts who I think are so distant sometimes, it still persists, but are so more distant from that African root than the Caribbean, to some extent, right? It's all part of that. It's all connected, right? Different
Yes.
branches, same core trunk or roots, or however you put it, right? Steelpan connects us. It is a place of community. It relies people coming together repeatedly to practice that, and that rhythm is there. From that, the engine rooms of a steel pan orchestra is the drums and the iron, and they are literally doing the thing that was annoying colonial powers, making music out of that. And so those who can connect to that, I want to say, can feel it almost ancestrally in some way, like, no, this is the thing we were doing, and it brings me such joy. That joy is something they tried to kill. They didn't want it. You were expressing joy when I want you to be miserable. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to be oppressed. I want you to feel the weight of the knee on your neck. And here you are being joyful with these songs. Ah, so again, it can come from this other place, but it is that ultimate act of, you think you are killing me, but you are enabling my creativity. All right, I have to born out this spirit of resistance to create
Mm-hmm.
something that doesn't make you win. So I
Exactly.
think that's my version of that story that, um, says if we are connecting to that, we are connecting to something that says, no, this is how we resisted
Yeah.
that. Um, and so here's an expression of our music now that has transcended that period of
Mm-hmm.
oppression. We sometimes forget it, um, but it's there and it's still going.
No, absolutely. Because as you said, drumming was banned at a time. There were laws against it. So it's still coming out within us, so to speak. And
Yeah.
with that, Darren, we're just going to go down to Calypso because it's often described as a storytelling tradition. Would you say that it kind of parallels the West African griots?
You said Calypsonians?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, for sure. For sure. My understanding of griots, is without a doubt they are oral historians, right? To put it in another way, they're oral historians. Not I reject the more I've gone into like African history and understanding that they had to destroy libraries. They had
Mm-hmm.
whatever was written and written in ways, we had both. The oral one was a perfected, right? Griots were a perfected sort of transmission to the many. And so what you have with Calypso is doing that same thing, right? It's an ancestor of that same tradition. It just has gone through its way, survived somehow, and here we have Calypsonians talking the emotions of the people and educating again along the dimensions of educating them, expressing their emotions and their frustrations, and almost sort of calls to action. Um, right? So when liter written literacy has its challenges, right? We still see that, right? Living in the US now, where there is a literary crisis, we see that, right? And so it becomes people are taking things at the word of mouth, and it has its problems, but that transition is quicker and faster in some ways. Or if done well, right? I hear Calypso and that thing is an earworm for me. I don't need to stay in this place. I will leave your presence and start humming that tune over and over. That's how you learn. You keep repeating that song. And if I've perfected a way for you to hear bam ba bam bam bam, and I have this, and you are singing it, you are sharing it beyond this interaction. That's what I think West African griots were doing and very skilled at. And so I can't look at calypsos, which speaks to not only the history, right? When they talk about things that are happening in the US, when they talk about things that are happening locally, and they give you this, the way they had with words and the music, and of course, then there's the rhythm under there. Because some people were dancing to calypsos, and you still sway, you still do this stuff. The expression is still there. That that is definite. I can't piece them apart. I see the ancestral root. That again, same tree, different branches, if you will. So we can be like, oh, but this one is a green flower. Well, look, right? This one's a yellow mango. This is a green mango. It's the same mango. It's just different times.
Exactly, exactly. Great analogy. And, with Caribbean folk songs, they carry again another strong sense of history. What do these songs reveal about everyday life, struggle, and of course, community?
Our folk songs tell a tale, right? So it's a similar thing, but I want to say it tells more than that's where it's I think it's coming from the people of the people. A griot maybe like coordinated in some way and like a specialist. The folk songs are what maybe the griots taught them and they start singing together, right? That can range from again a song on mangoes, as simple as that, because we like mangoes, so we're going to make a song out of it. Gossip, the tongues gossip, that right? As a form of entertainment, as a form of right, the folk music goes into procedures of things and even the storytelling of whatever cycle. I'm trying to think if there's a song that tells you the variety of mangoes, right? It's not only just we want money to go and buy. I want a penny to buy mango vet, right? And it's telling you the different type of mango, dudu, suse, mate. Just within the names of the mangoes in that folk song, tell you, wait a minute, but this is a French word. Oh, but this is right mango, and then we are labeling it in that. That tells you, oh, there were this the history of we had French influence here, right? And so colonial
Yes.
powers changed,
Yeah.
and that's where it got messy for me. It's just like, was it because the colonial power changed, or you had somebody? There's so much mixing that has gone on, right? And so, well, I call it this, you call it that, you call it mango vert, green mango.
Mhm.
These mixings. So our folk songs reveal that everyday life, that struggle, that forming community. Um, processing it's again common experiences, so whether it's death, grieving, I mean infidelity, that's where some of the gossip can come from. Processing emotions, right? I think of grief, there's songs we talk about grief and working through that, or again historical figures, sometimes the death of there's mourning songs that we have in folk. um there's I'm remembering a one that's called Stuttering Pastor, right? And so it's something we do when we sort of describe people. We sometimes take their issues, different abilities, disabilities, and we sort of ingest, but sometimes with affection,
Yes.
you know, incorporate that. That's again, these are all, I see them, music historian in me sees them as artifacts
Yeah.
that give you beyond the dimensions. It tells you all these things. I can take this piece of music and analyze it for where this was in history. Is it talking
Mhm.
about something that's happening? It tells me who was here. It tells me I can do something else on the communal practices. That song survived because it meant something to a number of people, that we have variants and versions of it, right? It
Mhm.
trying to trying to trace folk songs through the different islands and then trying to notate it. And I read a study on this. It was littered with a lot of um done by a white ethnomusicologist, littered with a lot of just disdain and looking down. And I was just like, wow, this is what you already thought. But watching them try to go to different areas in a community in Jamaica and figure out the folk song. So they wanted to write it down. Great. I now have an artifact of that. But watching how it differed from place to place, then watching how it jumped from island to island, I still couldn't be like, how did this folk song before radios get from there to here?
Mhm.
Right? Or a melody or a
Mhm.
rhythm. That
Yeah.
I think that was the chain back I had to. I hear this rhythm. Sometimes it's a 3-3-2. Like, let's call it the clave. Ta, ta, ta. That's a basis of, I'm going to butcher it. I never know which one is what's Bad Bunny's type of music? Not reggaeton. Oh, I'm horrible. But some of the genres that have that there, and we see it then. I saw it then in the underlying bum 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 bum
Mhm.
of calypsos, and I went, that is the same rhythm that's in this and over in Cuban music. How did you all get it? Anyway, I've jumped back to the thing I had, but again, our folk songs carry that, and again, in all the dimensions, how to deal with that conflict, the things that were happening, motherhood, community living, fatherhood,
Yeah.
celebrations, grief, processing grief, all of the mourning songs and what we did and where we went. The names of places is a great one for those who do I want to say, when you're making maps or just names of places, right? So
Yeah.
what has been preserved of indigenous names, what they named it versus what a colonial map said it was,
Yeah.
sometimes lives in soil. Like, what is this place? No, but they were here. Oh, this map now says it was, I don't know, New Scotland. No, they were referring to this place. This is from them. That artifact shows their version of this.
Mhm. Exactly. And would you say that, with colonization, the impact that it had, because it did, as you mentioned before, include the banning of drumming in some areas, what other effects did it have, of course, on cultural expression and connection to ancestry?
So I thought of this as, what is the impact of it?
Hmm.
One, definitely, I like to phrase this as, I think it kept us back,
Hmm.
right? What could have been if not,
Yeah.
right? And I think that'll always be the space we occupy when we start to think of indigenous things, or things. What it's going to be an imagined sort of space with the
Hmm.
clues that we have. What could it have been if our philosophies were allowed to blossom and bloom? So its impact is one, that it has kept us back in some way, but from it, we have created something. And this is where it gets sticky, right? I'll use my name if that helps, right? Like, I've
Hmm.
just, my last name is Shillingford. Whether I like it or not, that's the name I was born under. I can say all these other things, and then I have a colonial name. Should I change it? Do I identify with it now? That's up for debate, and that's for me to be on that journey. Um, right? I can simply change it. I think in the Caribbean we also face some of that. What parts of this do we accept? It happened, and we have grown from it, and we want to continue to evolve from it. I think, you know, in what ways do we still make it our own, right? I don't want it to be like centering colonialism, right? In the whole discourse, centering colonialism is still a thing. We don't like, well, it was resistance to this. I want us to get to that place where we see it as that thing, and we can we remember what's happened here, but we distance ourselves. And that's why I think the Caribbean has more space. I continue to see this contention. In the Caribbean, we did not have an overarching presence of colonizers still. We do in economic ways, right? And other things that we continue to see playing out now in political ways. But for the most part, their smaller communities have been allowed to explore. Steelpan has been allowed to do its thing, to grow. So it's had an impact on our cultural expression and ancestry. Yes, because do we want to sit around singing stories of this happened to us, and yes, that's a great story. This is how we overcame.
Yes.
But that's not our only story.
Exactly.
So it is a form of our cultural expression, but just again, what has survived, that resilience of what has survived. Yes, we emerged from this, but we also kept these little things, right? We protected them so much that they survived this systemic wiping out, right? Like, and people, we forget how many people were killed, were murdered, were just like the indigenous wiped out. These are libraries, these are, songs, these are untold things that were just erased. But herein lies, again, like the resistance of IT. However we spell it now, using that alphabet that was imposed onto us. I do not know what the indigenous alphabet was. I wish I knew. It might be there in what we're calling hieroglyphics in some sort of way. But the name, right? Dominica's own is Whitey Kupuli. Telling that, and that just staying with someone and being like, actually, there's another name. That in itself carrying over time and just being like, no, but we preserved this. We can call it Haiti now because we've identified with that, but having both new ways for that. I think ultimately that is trying to find our connected ways, right? The Caribbean is united by that similar colonial history, and so that should tell us something about what we have, right? There's similar things that happen. So whilst I do see it as, yes, there's influence there, there's also this same thing happened there. Of this struggle, and we are all trying to undo this. And so we can help each other in that way. In a lot of ways, the global south is connected in that way. But yes, in our region, right? How brilliant they were, how connected they were to keep these pieces alive.
Exactly.
And express that culture.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the opposite, because of what's happening today, how do you see fusion across the genres, across Caribbean music? Would you describe it as progress or evolution, or is it at risk creating further disconnection from traditional forms?
That is a tough question, but this is where I've landed with it. I see fusion as a necessary, right? And so sometimes there's a paper I was writing, and I purposely put this. I called French Creole, speaking about, in an evolution of French, right? Because we can be like, we've been told, this is a bastardization of the language. It is spent thinking it down. But I went, no, but it's combining elements of Kikongo, of African grammar structures and all these things onto this language that is imposed onto us, right? And so all the patois, all the creoles have that exact same thing. And that's where fusion becomes, I will do what you're doing, but I'm going to still put in my pocket, right, a piece of me that you can't take, right? I think of this is again, I'll express it here. I jump to things like this is the grain of rice we would store in the bantu beads of the women to cross over there. You have me coming, you're displacing me, you're trying to erase this here. But you know what? I have brought this food here and I'm going to make something out of it. Right? My rice and beans in a different way. When you start eating jollof rice, you'll be like, wait now.
Yeah.
Right? Fusion, and this is where my Dominica is going to shine through for me because I have been trying to center this philosophy, which I will work on at some point, but I'm still in the infant stages. Bouillon, the popular music there, is called bouillon, and it is based on that fusion, right? In cooking, it's fusion. This is what I have in my fridge. Man, we're making a stew. Put, and I have this. It is a combination of things. I do not want this to go bad. I am putting it, make a bouillon. That philosophy in itself, Trinidadians don't like to acknowledge this, but it's what we've been doing all the time, right? Trinidad is the one saying that Ras Shorty I, Dominica holds this preciously, but not many people want to accept it. Ras Shorty I, inventor of soca music, was in Trinidad, in Dominica, for some time, working with musicians there who were doing bouillon music. And for them, again, not having the words to say it, but they were fusing, the traditional jingping bands with then this modern pop song, synthesizers and all these things. That sort of a fusion. So I'll take that's happening there. I do not claim soca, but the idea of fusing things together, I want to believe was a seed planted. He goes to Trinidad and be like, we need a unifying sound, African and Indian elements. Fuse that together. Right now, without people realizing it, like that is the one thing I love about Trinidad. I think it happens in Jamaica. These fusions, we love it in cuisine if we like it, right? But they are, and this is where I have to jump to the food because I see it there more vividly, right? You have a curry and they say, no, curry is from India and these parts of the world, and you have stew. And when curry stew hit, because you have mixing of people, you're like, oh, curry stew, right? There are people, oh, I don't want curry stew. Give me curry, give me stew. Curry stew, oh, that tasting good. There's so many other things. Fusion cuisine, we love. Man, go down to Trinidad and just start seeing all what start to mix or all what's there. They season up the Chinese food is a thing. It's its own distinct thing. That is where I am, what I have, and I'm going to make it work. That, if you think of it in a way of honoring both things, I think people with mixed identities, we want to incorporate, this is part of me, this is part of me, this is part of my community, this is part of my community. When we stick together, when we work together, we will create something it is not, you can think of it as a bastardization, right? There's going to be tension between those that say, preserve the culture exactly as it should be. And there are those who come along and think, no, but these are people, I resonate with these people. Let us make our kalalu, let us make our fusion. So that is always going to be a thing we contend with, I think. But everything has to evolve or perish. And that's, I think, sometimes what happens when we hold on to that old thing for so long, right? It becomes unstable and then poof, classical music, I'll put it there. You all have held on to these dead white men for so long. This is me speaking more to classical musicians. You have held on to them so long. Right now, nobody's interested in them. Nobody, right? But what's interesting, wait, what do you mean they were black musicians? I haven't seen this music. That revitalizes it in some way because what did they do? In some instances, one, the identity is that fusion, right? It's giving something new to an area where we weren't seeing it, right? Women composers in that time had to put their name underneath their husband's name, Clara Schumann. That fusion sometimes as a form of preservation, right? It if you want it to go along the distance, accept it to taking on something else. It's there and we can always find, again, that's a seed, that is the same root. We get back to how it is connected, but how it has to evolve to be preserved. So the fusion will be met with some confusion. We don't like change. People love what is there. It's for these people who mix and the artists who see the value in both to honor them both. There is sometimes when people take things and they're just like, oh, well, right? There's a lot of cultural appropriation we say when we see Steelpan being just performed,
Yes.
Hawaiian shirts, you didn't do anything to it, and you're not giving it the oomph, understanding the this is a big conversation. My music education side is coming out. I'm going to come back on it. Of teaching without music, it has to be accessible to all. I'm not going to put this thing there. No, you come into that pan. Here we go. Bam dam bam badam. Again,
Mm-hmm.
dum 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 badam. You are there. You are interacting with a multi generational group. So, where is I going with this? Preserving and that fusion, right? When we there's going to be resistance from those, but that's how it goes forward. That's a way for it to go forward. Some of it will not, some things come together and go, it didn't really capture the hearts of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are far fewer people who like that, right? Sometimes we're just a one-off permutation, right? I'm trying to think of culinarily. This is where I have to jump to that, but uh, yeah.
That's
I'll
funny.
go back into music of just like Spanish chutney soca.
Mm.
Soca being a fusion of those elements, right? And we know soca. Chutney soca being like preserving more of the dominant parts or changing the lyrics. I can't remember. There's chutney soca and there's soca chutney. I can't remember. There's one that has a flip. But those fusions, right? It's there. It's all mixing. And now because we are so close to Trinidad is so close to Venezuela and the influx of migrants, somebody came in and said, no, 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 we're speaking all that. Parang music, parang music, Christmas music. Right? Trinidad is a phenomenon who just starts singing in a different language. That's not the dominant language. We start singing in another language for one time of the year. Everybody understands and has a basic fluency in some Spanish because they learn the songs.
Mm.
Spanish chutney soca is new, and some people are going, what is that? But, right, we are neighbors, and we have this fusion on top of a fusion, on top of a new fusion, because I changed the language. And you just go, what? All under the umbrella of that's Trinidad music or that's Caribbean music. Fusion for so. So I view it in a positive light, but I know people will fight
Yeah.
for tooth and nail, keep the tradition. It's
Yeah.
important for us to know, but yeah.
No, it is. And I love your analogies because you're making me hungry. But it's good. But it's good. And Darren, as we come to a close on this particular episode, what would you say are your final thoughts that you'd like to leave the listeners about the importance in understanding Caribbean history, identity, and memory through music?
So as you started off, music is a form of that memory and is an archive of these things. It is I call it multi-dimensional,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is not just the words on a page. Sure, that's your lyrics, right? And that can be very poetic and tell you
Mm-hmm.
things. We can dance with that in poetry in and of itself.
Yes.
So on that level, then comes the melody, which sometimes is an influence. It's reifying, melodies that exist, intervals, the patterns that they use to make that something. There's a signature to calypsos and how it is done that you can sometimes tell when a European composer tries to make a calypso, it misses
Yes.
a mark in some
Yeah.
ways that we just go, right? And that also has to do with the rhythms
Exactly.
and the rhythms that tells that story. That's what's the equivalent now? A CD-ROM drive that stores information in multiple ways. That's that. That's a sonic memory storage, right? Most of us have good hearing ears. You
Mm-hmm.
are hearing this, embodying it into rhythm and dance. So music, dance, the art forms. But yes, music is a central part to that, right? We make music together. That's one thing about Caribbean music. I think we have to understand the community making. It's in a lot of
Yes.
music, but as a pianist, I hate playing just by myself. I go, this is not
Mm-hmm.
fun. It's just me. Listeners can be part of that. Um, but right, that can be a lonely thing that where we have people and that really open to us. So understand music as its important thing and what it means to us. As being in education, music is seen as the bastard child. I see how we don't get funding, we don't get things, we are the first one to get cut. Luckily, in the Caribbean, we do have music existing in communities.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself makes it far more accessible to all. That's our archive. That tells you a better story than any textbook would, because believe it or not, those are very biased. Now, yes, your music is going to be biased, but it will give you the emotional depth. If you can unpack it, if you can unpack, double entendres, all these things, our music gives you far more perspective on our people, on our history, and we have to keep it going. We are the ones that have to curate that for ourselves. It is no Western, right? Again, they would steal artifacts from Africa and put them in their museums. And right now we are going, we wait for you to just come and extract it and put it in your books and tell us back to us how we've done it. No, we have to support it, and we do it. That is our legacy. That is how we tell the truth in many ways. This is how we decolonize our minds, right? From Bob Marley's reggae and all that he left there and said on those multiple levels, and it resonated to our Calypsonians, to new students who are coming up with things that, being creative in their own ways to resist our rule of like, no, but it gotta be this way. That music is going to reflect that. And this is where you have to believe in humans in the age of AI, right?
Yes.
I can destroy a library, I can destroy people to an extent, but those who survive with it survive with something in here that you can't undo. AI doesn't know yet what I have in my mind. I haven't brought it out. AI doesn't know what I'm preserving. Music, sonically, once it exists and is embodied, so our Steelpan players, until all the Steelpan players die, Steelpan is not going to die. Right? It's going to be with that person and being like, this is what this meant. And any amount of literature and whatever is going to describe it until you sit out there with a pan and you start playing and you start dancing with it. You need to have that experience. So that is the importance of music in our societies, whether we realize it or not. As soon as things are trampling on our music and our expression, so when artists cannot speak out about what it is, when their music is being criticized, when they want you to play it down, when they're taking over, this is a plug for the US, when they're taking over your artistic institutions and changing it up or pausing it or whatever it is, know that they are trying to erase something. So we need to be vigilant when things are happening with music. That is something that they're trying to destroy. So
no, that is fabulous. And again, just thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and to be able to speak to this, because as I said before at the beginning, this is just another way to look at a different form of history, a different form of archival memory, and what's passed down and what's innate within us, because we react to all this music, right? So I definitely appreciate it. Hopefully you may be able to come on again in the future to talk about maybe a different subject of music, but definitely appreciated this. And thank you so much, Darren.
You're most welcome. Glad to share this. As you can tell, I love talking about this, passionate about it, and any sort of researcher is always happy to share some of that knowledge. We need to get it out there. That's why I'm trying to do it with social media. I'm glad to have a podcast. I thought of starting one myself, so you're doing me a favor by I was literally saying that I need to just interview myself, but that's harder. And so when this came through, I went, that's the answer. So this is a great start. And I'm always supporting anybody who's doing stuff, creating this artifact of these all different ways to get this out.
Perfect. No, and thank you again. So take care.
All right, take care.
Hoped you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and write a review for the episode wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you.